The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Susan Sweeney, one of the deans at eLearningU, and I'd like to welcome you to today's program. For anybody that's new on the call, we go for about 50 minutes of great content, and then we have about 10 minutes of Q&A. We do our Q&A one of two ways. You can type your question in the question area, and I will read those questions out to our expert, AJ Wilcox, today. Alternatively, if you'd like to speak directly to AJ with your question, just wait till we're in the Q&A time period. And when we're in the Q&A time period, just click on the little hand symbol on your control panel. That lights up on my screen, lets me know that you want me to unmute you. I will call you by your first name, give you a heads up. I will unmute you. You'll be able to speak to AJ to get your question answered. Everybody will be able to hear the question. Everybody can hear the answer. And once your question's been answered to your satisfaction, I will then mute you again and we'll go on to the next question. AJ has provided us with a copy of today's program. It's in the handouts area, so you can drag and drop or save file as, depending on how your operating system works. And you can have that. And let's see, I guess that's it. We'll get started. Our expert today is AJ Wilcox. He's a B2B social advertising professional and founder of B2 Linked, a LinkedIn ads performance agency, which manages the most sophisticated accounts worldwide. They're certified LinkedIn partners and absolutely love B2B marketing. AJ's a ginger and a triathlete who lives with his wife and 4 kids in Utah, US, Ohio. And his company car is a go-kart. Now, he tells me he's got a few others, but he still does have the go-kart. So, AJ, so happy to have you with us and really looking forward to your program.
Awesome, Susan. Thanks for the kind intro. All right, I'm assuming you guys can all see the slides here. LinkedIn Ads, the B2B marketer's silver bullet. I am a huge fan of LinkedIn Ads, as I'm sure you can tell. We talk about it being the boring network when you compare it to Facebook and TikTok and everything else. But man, there's just so much exciting going on with LinkedIn Ads. And so I'm stoked to get to share some of that excitement with you. Susan gave a great explanation of me, but I fell in love with LinkedIn Ads when I got into B2B advertising about 9 years ago. And before that, I started out in search engine optimization and heavy into Google Ads. So now I'm obviously all in on LinkedIn. There weren't that many people who were out there talking about it. And I went, okay, I just finished running LinkedIn's largest spending account worldwide. I'd love to share that with people. And so that's why I started the agency. Some of the talk triggers that you can listen for if you want to decide if LinkedIn Ads is a channel that you might want to pursue are things like if the sales team is telling you that they're seeing poor lead quality coming from either Google or Facebook or both, because both of those networks are really good at reaching, like Google's good at reaching people who are looking for you. Facebook's good at reaching people who are interested in the types of things that you're talking about, but it's really difficult to qualify them, especially if you're selling a high ticket kind of item or those larger B2B deal sizes. Same thing if you've hit diminishing returns, you feel like you've maxed out all of the search volume on Google or Facebook, you've hit all of the lookalikes and custom audiences and you want to go further, but it doesn't make sense to expand all the way into like interests and dilute that lead quality. It's a good clue that LinkedIn is probably a really good answer for you. There are some fantastic things and some not so fantastic things about LinkedIn Ads. The first is the targeting. It's the reason why we pay LinkedIn's prices is to get access to this ability to target by job title, by department, seniority. We can target specific members of groups. We can target company size, industry. We can even target by specific company name and a whole host of other things. The beautiful part, though, about this is the majority of, especially white-collar professionals, have LinkedIn. And so the people that you get access to, it's near perfect penetration of a market. Whereas on Facebook or Google, you're kind of at the mercy of who happen to include some information about their business and who happens to be searching for it right now. We also know that people on LinkedIn tend to keep their profiles up to date. I joke that LinkedIn's the second person to know after I make a career change, after I tell my wife. So I tell my wife, Then I go and update my LinkedIn profile because I want all of my friends and colleagues to know what I'm up to. And so because of that, you might see people who bother to put their job title into their Facebook profile, but it also might be out of date like 3 jobs ago. It happens quite regularly. When someone is on LinkedIn, they're thinking about their job or their career, and it puts them in a really good headspace for you to pitch something to them that helps them in either their career or their current job. And then finally, every time we've done a study about the different channels and how they react, we've always found 2 things. We found that LinkedIn closes the largest and most significant deals, and Google Ads always closes deals the fastest. So if your goal is to just get business in the door right now, then use search channels like Google Ads, Bing Ads, maybe even SEO, if that's not too slow for you. But if you're looking for those massive deals and partnerships, it's got to be LinkedIn Ads. The biggest challenge that people have with LinkedIn is really the cost. And I alluded to this earlier, but the average cost per click on LinkedIn is between about $8 to $11, especially if you're targeting anyone in North America. So that's usually 3 to 5 times more expensive than Facebook, and it's a hard pill to swallow. So because of those high costs, we wonder, who is a good fit for LinkedIn ads then? And what we've found is really 3 niches where LinkedIn ads tends to make the most sense. The very first, and this is probably the most applicable to you, are high value lead generation. And that would be either B2B or B2C, where let's say closing a new deal is worth at least $15,000 to you. Most is B2B because that's where the large deal sizes tend to be, but larger B2C deals also can happen here nicely. And we found that usually you spend $1,000 to $4,000 in ad spend to land a deal. And so if your deal is worth $15,000 and you spent 1 to 4 to land it, there's plenty of room in there to pay for an agency and a sales rep to close the deal and other overhead expenses. Also, white collar recruiting, though. If there's any position that's white collar in your company that you're trying to recruit for, you can target just people who already have that job title and show them an ad that says, hey, are you looking for a change? You look qualified, and you get these really inexpensive, high-performing, already qualified types of candidates. So that's great. And then I also higher education, a lot of MBA programs use LinkedIn ads for recruiting, and those are really the 3 main ones. Anytime I'm doing some sort of social advertising, I think of this acronym, AMO, like bring your ammo to social advertising. And it stands for your audience, your message, and your offer, which are really the 3 things that every social media campaign needs. Think of it like 3 legs of the stool, and if you're missing one of them, it just falls over. The first there is the audience. It's who you're targeting, and this is hands down the reason why we use LinkedIn ads. It's access to this audience you just can't get anywhere else. The M is the message, and it's really what the prospect sees. What type of ad format are you using? And what ad copy and imagery did you choose? You can determine all that once you know, the offer. And the offer is really the call to action, the lead magnet. What are you asking people to do from your ads? And we'll get to this on a different slide, but there's all kinds of different offers we could have from an ad. It could be anything from come and read this blog post to talk to our sales rep or buy something now, and everything in between on the scale of like what's easy to ask for and what there will be a lot of friction doing. So we'll go through each piece of this ammo and how it relates to your LinkedIn advertising, but I wanted to just get that out in front of you. We'll tackle the message first in terms of the ad formats that LinkedIn gives us. And I'm going to go in order of which ones I think you should start with if you're not already investing in LinkedIn ads. The very first one here is sponsored content. Now, sponsored content has many different flavors, but the one you probably want to start with is the most simple, and LinkedIn calls it a single image ad or single image sponsored content. And the way this works, you're going to expect to pay anywhere between about $8 to $11 per click. And you get text up above that's called the intro. You get a big, beautiful image that takes up basically the whole screen on mobile and on desktop. It kind of looks like what you see here. And you also have a headline down below. When someone clicks on it, they can either go to a landing page that you specify, or they could stay on the ad itself and access a form there, which we'll get to. You can expect a click-through rate of about 0.4%, so a little bit less than 0.5%, and that'll let you know if you're basically doing a good job of catching people's attention or not. And this is a very simple ad to troubleshoot, which is why I tell everyone to start with this. I recommend it to about 95% of advertisers as being their main ad format. Then next we have text ads. Now text ads are LinkedIn's cheapest and lowest risk ad, which sounds pretty great. The challenge here is that it's really hard to spend that much money on them because they are on desktop only, and probably about 80% of LinkedIn visitors are using mobile. So immediately you don't have access to everyone. And then they're also over in the right rail, and they look like ads. From this screenshot here, you can see it's the 3 little images over in the right rail. And those are your text ads. Now they're hard to see here on the slide because they're hard to see in real life. I wanted you to see like the reason why these have such a low click-through rate. So if you have a click-through rate that's anything over 0.025%, you're doing great. And to put that into perspective, that's 2.5 clicks out of every 10,000 times these ads are served. So you've got to have a pretty large audience to really drive much traffic here at all. But if you are on minuscule budgets, this is the right place to start because on average, they're $3 to $5 per click, but you can get traffic for as low as $2. That's the floor bid. Because they don't spend very much, and when they do spend, they don't cost as much, these are the lowest risk. It's a great place to start if you have a budget of, let's say, less than $2,000 or $3,000 a month. This would be a good place to dip your toe in the water. I only recommend these to about 15% of advertisers simply because they may not be worth your time to create. If it takes you the same amount of time to create text ads as it does sponsored content can spend 12 to 15 or maybe even 30 times more than text ads. And if it takes you the same amount of effort, you might say, well, I'd rather just focus my attention on what's going to spend and actually give me scalability. But text ads do a great job of supporting your sponsored content, the ones that are in the newsfeed. Then you've got what LinkedIn calls sponsored messaging. And there's 2 different flavors of sponsored messaging. Both show up in your inbox, in your LinkedIn messaging. And one they call a message ad. It feels like an email. And then the other is a conversation ad, which we'll get to on the next slide, that feels like a conversation. Think of it like a chatbot kind of experience, a choose your own adventure. And message ads, on average, are significantly more expensive than the other ad formats. So I try to stay away from these most of the time, but about 5% of the time it makes sense. So here's the breakdown of what causes these to be either inexpensive or a great deal. Rather than the other ad formats I've showed you, where you can say, hey, LinkedIn, I'm only going to pay if you get a click to my website. Message ads, you can only pay per person that you send it to. And so you're going to pay, call it 35 to 65 cents just to send it to someone. And you'll have no guarantee that they'll see that they got it or open it or then click on what you're asking them to click on, your call to action. And so immediately, if you do the math, that 50% on average will open and 4% on average, once they open it, will click, you end up with a cost per click of like $23 to $58 on average, which is insane. I mean, I wouldn't suggest anyone pays $23 to $58 for a click. But the cool part here is that's all the average. And if you have an offer that feels like a personal invitation, think if you got it as a cold email, would you be excited about it or mark it as spam? And if you're in the camp of, oh yeah, I think this would be exciting, then it's probably going to get more like a 70 or an 80% open rate and click-through rates of 20, 30%. And so you can get your cost per click significantly under, let's say, $3 or $4 with the right offer. So I tell you, people, don't use one of these sponsored messaging ads unless you have an offer that feels special. It's, because of who you are in the industry, we want to give you early access or a sneak peek at something, or we want to invite you as a VIP to this event where you'll get to rub shoulders with your peers and have dinner and drinks. Something like that feels special. Don't use these for like download our latest white paper or watch this webinar. It's probably not going to work very well. They can work very well as retargeting ads, though. If you can fire this off as they've interacted with something on your website before, and now you're going to send them a pretty personalized message, that can work nicely. So here's the conversation ads I was telling you about. They show up the same way, but rather than just an email that you say either yes or no, like I'm either interested and I'm going to take the action they ask, or I'm just going to ignore it, mark it as read and move on. Conversation ads, you give them some kind of prompt and you can give them like 4 different responses and that they can make. And so think of it like this. If you're going to advertise to people in your industry about a trade show that's happening, you might say, hey, are you going to be at this trade show? And if they say no, you could say, okay, well, do you want to join our webinar next week or something like that? You give them an out. But if they said yes, you go, great, we're going to be at booth 13. Come and check us out. And we'd love to give you some swag or some kind of special experience. So these can be great. We found them to be on average about 30% more efficient. So think of like 30% lower cost per lead when you use these over the message ads, because you're able to give them a more tailored experience and more options to find something that they might actually care about. Still needs that VIP offer though. If you don't have something that feels very special, I wouldn't use either of these ad formats. They'd be too expensive, and I would just stick to sponsored content where you can set a max bid and say, I'm not willing to pay more than $8 or $9 for a click. Then you've got dynamic ads. Now, I don't recommend these very often, or at least I didn't used to, because their cost per click was like $13 to $15. It was crazy. It was more than sponsored content. And it's also like text ads where it sits over in the right rail only on desktop and doesn't get clicked on very often. So because of that, I went, I'm not going to pay more to be shown less. That doesn't make sense. But since then, LinkedIn have artificially lowered the prices on these to where now they're $6 to $8. So significant, well, in some cases, significantly less, but they're usually less than sponsored content. And because of that, I go, that might be worthwhile. So these you can use to get followers to your company page. You can have them download an asset, send them to a landing page, things like that. So because they lowered the price, now I recommend them about 10% of the time. I didn't used to recommend them at all. Then you have the lead gen form ads, like I was mentioning before. This is where instead of sending someone to your landing page where they have to wait for the page to load and maybe there's not a great experience there, maybe you didn't test very well for mobile. There's a lot of challenges with sending someone to a landing page, like namely as a marketer having to create that experience. So LinkedIn came out with what Facebook's had for quite a while that they call lead ads. When you interact with the ad, this drawer will slide down with the form fields right within the ad itself. And LinkedIn's going to autofill everything they know. So if you're only asking for first name, last name, and email address, LinkedIn will autofill that. And all the prospect has to do is just click the button that says submit. If you ask for something like their work email or a phone number, it won't autofill that. They'll have to type that thing in. But if anything that you use that LinkedIn does know, they'll autofill for you, and it's great. Because of this, you'll usually see conversion rates that are 10 to 50% higher, but we've seen them double or triple in some cases. So these can be absolutely fantastic if your goal is to get the lowest cost per getting someone into your database possible. The big challenge here, though, is because LinkedIn made it so easy for people to convert here, a lot of times it doesn't make a very solid impression on that person. 2 or 3 days later, they may not even remember filling out your form. So because of that, I like to recommend, if your goal is to get a VIP kind of person heavily interacting with your brand, I would still send them to a landing page experience that they're going to remember. But otherwise, if your goal is just to get the right people into your database to nurture them, lead gen form ads all the way. About 60% of our clients use these, and it integrates directly into Eloqua, Marketo, HubSpot, Salesforce. And if you don't have one of those platforms, the $20 a month plan from Zapier.com will pass this information from LinkedIn right into whatever CRM you have. And there's now retargeting too. You can specifically say, I want to show someone an ad who has opened this form but didn't submit last time, or I want to exclude everyone who's already submitted, and that way I'm not paying for their additional clicks later. We have video ads, and these recently just got a little bit better. Before, there wasn't much you could do with them. You show someone a video, and it takes up the same inventory as sponsored content. So LinkedIn looked at it and said, well, if we're making $8 to $11 a click when someone clicks on a static ad, video, we've got to get about the same amount of money. And so they have costs per view that are insane if you've used Facebook. So we're paying like 10 to 25 cents per person who watches at least 2 seconds on LinkedIn. On Facebook, you might pay 1 to 2 cents per 3-second view. So quite a bit less expensive to go with Facebook. So we're paying a premium for LinkedIn's targeting, but LinkedIn just made this better. Just a couple months ago, they released retargeting for video, and now we can do cool sequencing. So it's like, if you've watched 50% of my first video, now I want to show you the next one in the sequence. And you can do this sequential storytelling in a really cool way. And so now I recommend it if you have good video creative. Before that, I was just thinking it's really expensive, and there's not much you can do with the traffic if they don't happen to click on your call to action. Now we can retarget. So that's cool. The same rules apply as any sort of social video here. The video is going to autoplay on someone's screen with the sound muted. So it's really important to, number one, get right to the action so it stops people from scrolling past it. And number two, make sure your subtitles are either burned in or you have a .srt file that inserts the subtitles on LinkedIn for you. Because if 80% of people aren't going to watch with the sound on, then you want to get them involved in the dialogue so that they want to keep watching. Then you've got carousel ads, and these were a direct port or theft from Facebook. I don't see a whole lot of value here. It's basically the ability to put multiple calls to action in the same sponsored content ad that shows up in someone's newsfeed. And if you've got a cool story to tell with issues next to each other where you can have someone scroll through, maybe there's value here. But the rest of the time I go, creating these is a lot of work because you have to create multiple ads for every one ad. And it's not like you get a performance increase. They're not cheaper than single image ads, and they don't get much better performance. So I say don't waste your time here unless you've already tested through and kind of maxed out the other ones and you're looking for some variety. Okay, so now we get to the A in our AMO acronym, the audience. And I mentioned some of the targeting that we have access to, but we also have things like what someone's education was, where they studied, what they graduated with, what their degree was, the general demographics that you expect, like male, female, age, location, and location got quite a bit better too. We can now go all the way down to the city level where it used to be a metro area. Job title, seniority, job function, like what department they're in, skills, groups, company name. I mean, and this is everything you see on the screen here is probably only about a fifth of everything we have access to. So it is insane how good and tightly targeted we can get around business professionals. Some of the things that are really helpful to understand, you can use almost all of these things in combination with each other. So you can say you have to be at this size of company and in this role and in this industry to see my ads. So that's what combinations do. They make your audience even more hyper-targeted. And you can also use most of them as exclusions, where you could say, hey, here is a list of all of my competitors. I'm going to upload that to LinkedIn and then add that as an exclusion. So I'm not wasting clicks or wasting impressions on the people who are my competitors. You could do the same thing with current and past customers, with people who've been leads in the past that didn't close. You can exclude all of those folks or include them for anything you want to do. Because there are so many ways of targeting a single kind of professional on LinkedIn, we've devised a strategy where we can systematically test every type of targeting on LinkedIn, because one type of targeting may produce higher volume and it's easier to scale. One can give you better lead quality or lower cost per lead. And so unless you have these broken out, you're not ever going to find those insights and that would help you figure out what's the best way to reach my audience in the future. So we've broken these 4 out, and any one audience, we're going to try to target all 4 of these ways if it makes sense. So the first would be like job title. This could be something like event planner or speaker wrangler. I don't know, something that makes a lot of sense. Then you have job function with seniority, which would be like someone's general department. Maybe it's HR. And seniority, you can say manager and above, or individual contributor, which they call senior. Lots of different things you can do there. But this one tends to be pretty broad. Because it's broad, it's also the cheapest type of targeting. So that can be nice if it makes sense. Otherwise, you can do skills, and each member can have up to 50 skills in their profile. So if they have a job title that LinkedIn doesn't understand, they're probably going to split themselves into 50 different pieces here and tell you what it is they're skilled at or interested in. And that can be a great way to narrow in on someone if you can't reach them by job title. And you can also do groups like we've talked about and layer seniority on that. So if you go and find a group about tourism and travel B2B or something like that, you could say everyone who's in this group is a good fit for me. So I'm going to target everyone there and overlay some kind of a seniority. Maybe I say director and above or VP and above or just C-level. You can do that here. Job title tends to be more expensive because, first of all, LinkedIn only understands about 30% of job titles because they're a free-form field. Anyone can write anything they want. But also, it's the most competitive because most people look at job title and go, oh, great, I know who the prospect is by their job title. This is easy. So more people using it, there's higher demand, and then supply is lower because LinkedIn doesn't understand how to put everyone into a job title category, and it basically leads to higher cost. But we still use it a lot because it has such good precision on the person. LinkedIn only understands 30% of job titles, but the 30% they do, they probably understand very well. So you can make sure you're getting exactly the right prospect. So any one person, if we can target them 4 different ways, over time, we'll find out which one is cheaper, which one's more expensive, which one's higher quality, which one's lower volume. You can find all that out. So now we get to talk about the most important part of our AMO acronym, O, the offer. Now, this is what we alluded to before. You can ask anyone to do anything, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be willing to. So I've taken a bunch of different types of offers and ordered them from what I consider low friction, meaning you're not asking very much from the user, and most people are going to feel okay about taking that action, all the way to high friction. That's like, you're asking a lot of the user, and most of the time cold traffic won't do this at a high rate. So low click, and if you don't like it in the first paragraph, you can leave. And then high friction, you've got things like talk to my sales rep, buy something now, try a trial of something that's going to take you hours to get into, or come and watch a demo where you're going to get a sales pitch at the end. So with LinkedIn, I would highly recommend avoiding the 2 extremes here. You don't want to pay $8 to $11 to send people to blog posts that have a very low conversion rate. Otherwise, you're going to be paying a lot per conversion, and that's just you're providing a lot of value to the user, but I think LinkedIn's just too expensive for that for the vast majority of the time. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, if you're showing ads that say, here's what we do, talk to our sales rep, no one's on LinkedIn surfing around trying to say, I'm looking for a vendor to do business with. They're just not. So you won't find very many people clicking, and most of the time your ads will just shut off. It's about 95% of the time we try the bottom of the friction funnel and it fails. But what works extremely well is more that fat middle section here that we call the sweet spot. This is gated content, lead magnet offers, where you can say, download this free cheat sheet or checklist, consume this free guide, read this free ebook, join our free webinar, come to this free in-person event. All of these things are free and what I would consider very valuable. And if it's valuable enough, people will say, okay, I know someone's probably going to follow up if I put my form information in here, but this looks so valuable, I think that's worth it. And if you have content that really solves a major pain point for your clients or satisfies a major curiosity, and they would be willing to do this, then you can get your cost per lead, cost per opt-in significantly down. And then it's a good sales team is usually getting 10 to 20% of those people on calls for demos and getting a response from them. So it works out better economically most of the time than if you could send someone right to like get a demo. And if it comes out to $50 or $500 per lead to get a demo, and hopefully it's a really good performing demo, or you could get a cost per opt-in for content down to $25 to $40, and then you've got 10 to 20% of them who will hop on the phone with you. You can get your cost per appointment down to like $100 to $250, which is less than if you went straight for the kill. So I'm a big proponent of going content and value first in exchange for their contact info. LinkedIn's retargeting just got a little bit better. We mentioned how you can now retarget people who watched a certain amount of video. You can also retarget people who interacted with a lead form on LinkedIn. Those are brand new and really good. And I know that's going to keep getting better. We're still going to keep getting access to new places on LinkedIn that we can retarget that traffic. But you can also retarget people who get to your website, whether they came from LinkedIn or not. The big challenge, though, is that LinkedIn and their web retargeting is super weak. It's wholly reliant on cookies on someone's computer, and half of the browsers out there don't even accept cookies. So immediately, anyone who's using an iOS device like an iPhone, iPad, Safari, anyone using Mozilla browsers, immediately they're gone. They don't even qualify to be in your audience. And it's still pretty expensive. I mean, your original click might have cost $8 to $11. A retargeting click to reach that person again as kind of a warm audience is still around $4, and sometimes even higher. So where the real value here, I think, is actually in Google and Facebook. If you can use LinkedIn to get exactly the right people to your website, and then Facebook and Google both have amazingly cheap and effective retargeting, I think that's the right way to go. So I call this the dream team. Go ahead and set up LinkedIn retargeting. It doesn't hurt to pay a little bit less, but make sure Google and Facebook are picking that traffic up. Google, it'll go out to the entire Google display network, which is like 90% of the web. And on Facebook, you'll hit everyone on Facebook and Instagram and maybe even WhatsApp soon. And that's probably 90% of the social activities someone does. So, and you're probably less than $1 per click on all those networks. Can work extremely well. When you go to actually create the ads, I've got some tips for you that are kind of nuanced to LinkedIn. The first is people are not on LinkedIn to be entertained like they might be if they're on Facebook. They're usually on a mission. They're there to connect or send a message or learn something. And so you have to keep your ad copy short, punchy, to the point. You want to front load it and lead with the value. That means you're only getting a fraction of a second from people. So when they're scanning down their feed, make sure that right up front you're saying, hey, do you have this problem? Or here's a solution for anyone who feels problems like this, and it'll perform much better. I like the acronym WIIFM, everyone's favorite radio station. It stands for what's in it for me. So as you're writing ad copy, write as you're thinking, okay, what is in it for my prospect? What's going to get them excited? I'm not telling them, I'm going to make a lot of money when you click on this and become a lead. You're saying, here's the problem we solve. And then imagery, really same deal here. If you're already used to something like Facebook ads, you want images that contrast all of LinkedIn's color palette. So LinkedIn is very blues, grays, and whites. So is Facebook. So you want to avoid blues if you can, and try to use the contrasting colors. If you look on a color wheel, just opposite of blue is orange. So try to stay on that end of the color wheel. Things like greens, purples, reds, oranges, those all tend to work great. And the highest performing ads we've found tend to follow the same kind of rules. So I'll show you an example here. It doesn't actually follow all of the rules, but I'll share with you why. So the intro, we try to keep this under 130 characters because people are in a hurry on LinkedIn. They're not going to read a whole story. They're not going to read a whole monologue. So you want to keep this really short and punchy. You tell them two different things. Number one, why you should pay attention. And number two, your call to action, what they should do about it. And if you keep it short, it's all visible on desktop and mobile. If it goes over about 130 characters, some of your text will be cut off and they'll have to click. Not very many people are going to do. So keep it short so people can actually read everything that you worked so hard to write. You have this image. Now, the image, I told you, you want to make it stand out, avoid blues. This image doesn't do that very well. It looks a little bit blurry. It looks very organic. It's a picture that our client went and took of one of their coworkers in the office. So not a very impressive image for sure, but this one was incredibly successful. We were talking to directors and VPs of sales at large companies, and this image probably caught their attention because it doesn't look like it was made by a marketing department. It looks very natural in their newsfeed. And it also looks probably a lot like what their sales floors look like. They're used to seeing people with headsets on and engaged in conversation. So most of the time, I would say try to go for an image that just catches a lot of attention, but feel free to experiment. See if you can find something like this that breaks the rules. And then your headline, that's that text down below. I like two things here. I like to tell them what kind of content they're going to get. In this case, it was download, but you could have free webinar, you could have free cheat sheet, something like that. And then this is also a great place to put the title. This ad performed extremely well. We saw click-through rates that are about 5 to 6 times the average with this one, and you can tell why. This is targeting significant salespeople. It's sales executives at large companies, and we're saying we analyzed 18 million emails and we found what works. Grab this new infographic from us. So high click-through rate, high conversion rate. This turned out to be a great ad, even though the intro is a little bit long and the image just really isn't that amazing. Anyone who's looking to get started on LinkedIn ads, I've got a cool resource for you. This is the same onboarding checklist that we give to all of our new clients when we onboard them. It's the 8 things that we need in order to get started. And we wanted to share out the exact same thing for you, so you know exactly what you need to get together and lessen that learning curve. So go check out b2linked.com/checklist and download yours today. If you don't check that box that says, I want AJ or someone to contact me, you'll never hear from us ever again. This is purely, we want you to have the value. I also have the course on LinkedIn advertising on LinkedIn Learning. So if you have a premium subscription to LinkedIn, you've got LinkedIn Learning for free, and you can go and watch the whole training, the whole course for free. Otherwise, I think it's only $25. So that can be a good hold your hand and walk you through it kind of thing. I also host the LinkedIn Ads Show podcast. So if this was interesting to you and you want to go a lot deeper, I think episode 26 just dropped like yesterday. We go really deep. So Feel free to check out the podcast. We go into all of these topics we've talked about in great detail. We also get to interview many of LinkedIn's product managers, the people who are actually creating these products that we use all the time. Great. Now, Susan, I want to turn it back over to you for some Q&A. Everyone, you can see my email address here. Feel free to reach out, ask anything you want. My Twitter handle's there. I'm always on Twitter. And if you do want to connect on LinkedIn, make sure you just customize your connection request and let me know you heard me on Susan's program on eLearningU and you want to connect. Otherwise, I probably won't see it. So, Susan, with that being said, back over to you. Let's hit the Q&A and answer all of your questions.
Excellent, AJ. Thanks so much. Great presentation, as always.
You're most welcome. Thanks for the invite.
For anybody that joined us late, we do our questions one of two ways. You can type your question in the question area, and I will read those out to AJ. Alternatively, if you'd like to speak directly to AJ, just click on the little hand symbol. It lights up on my screen and lets me know that you want me to unmute you. I'll call you by your first name. I will unmute you. Everybody can hear the question. Everybody can hear the answer. Once your question's been answered to your satisfaction, I'll then mute you again and we'll go on to the next question. Next week, we've got 10 simple things you can do right now to bring customers back digitally during the pandemic. So make sure you register for that program for next week. And also encourage you to take advantage of AJ's offers, the checklist, the course on LinkedIn Learning, and his podcast. Episode 21, was it, AJ?
I think we're up to episode 26 now. But
okay.
Episode 1 is all about the basics. It's a lot of what we talked about today. But episode 6 goes into bidding and budgeting, how to make sure you pay the very least for the traffic on LinkedIn possible. Episode 10 goes really deep into offers, calls to action that work. So there's a lot of gold there.
Great. And also make sure that you download today's presentation in the handouts area that AJ has provided. Okay, so let's get into our questions. The first question is, to test this out, what would you suggest as a minimum budget?
Oh, great question. Budget-wise, it depends a little bit on your goals and what you're okay with. But we find when you've spent about $5,000 in the North American markets, you generally have enough conversions that your cost per conversion and your conversion rates become statistically significant. And the reason why this is valuable, if you're piloting a channel, you want to find out as quickly as possible, is this going to work for us? Is this profitable? Or does this look like it sucks? And if it sucks, you want to stop spending money so you're not wasting. So I would recommend, if you have it, $5,000 a month is a great starting budget that you can always scale up later if it's successful. And if it's not, you can cut out before you pay a second month of some agency to manage it, or you can just get it off your plate and get that time back. So I'd say 5,000 is a great number. If you don't have that much, let's say your budget is 2,000 or 3,000 a month, it's fine. It just means you'll have to run for a couple months before you find that same level of statistical significance. So just make sure, if you have a smaller budget, be patient. Don't let your exec team say, oh, it doesn't seem like LinkedIn's working very well, let's cut it off, when you've only spent a few $100s.
Okay, great. I think you answered this question, but I'll just ask it again. Is there retargeted advertising in LinkedIn?
Yes, there are 3 different kinds of retargeting, and there's a couple other things that kind of fit within the retargeting bucket. So I'll briefly go over them. We have web retargeting, which we kind of mentioned there towards the end. You can essentially say, anyone who's been to my website, I want to make eligible to see my ads on LinkedIn. That's not extremely powerful. We've had it since 2017, and it's not great. So this is where I would augment with Facebook and Google's retargeting products. But then we can also retarget anyone who's interacted with a lead gen form on LinkedIn, or anyone who's watched at least 2 seconds of a video all the way to, or all the way to completion. We can retarget people who viewed video. There's also this section of LinkedIn in the dashboard called matched audiences. And this is where you can upload lists of prospects. Let's say you have an email list of people who've become a lead but haven't yet closed. You could upload them and target them with an ad that just keeps you top of mind while they're in the decision-making process. You can also upload a list of company names. So, hey, LinkedIn, here's the Fortune 500, or hey, LinkedIn, here's all of our current customers that we want to exclude. And so those all kind of fit within the realm of retargeting, more or less warm or very targeted audiences. And all of those are possible right now on LinkedIn. Hopefully they'll continue to get even better.
Okay, and I think you just answered the next question. It's, can I upload my database and get ads in front of specific people like Facebook?
Yes, you will want to. So your audiences on LinkedIn have to be at least 300 people, and match rates are certainly better than Facebook for if you have business emails. If you have personal, it's probably about the same, maybe a little bit lower. So by rule, I'll say, if you have to have at least 300 people match, make sure you upload a list of, at least let's call it 600 people for the better chance of it being large enough to actually advertise to. And same kind of rules apply as Facebook, where if you don't have the email address, go ahead and fill out things like first name, last name, company name, job title, and LinkedIn has that information on pretty much everyone, and they'll go and match at a really high rate, even if you don't have the email address. So I highly recommend it. It's a great practice.
Okay, and we're down to 2 questions. So if anybody has anything they'd like to have covered during the program, please get it in now. The next question is, can you target someone else's contacts?
Ooh, you can actually. This is a little bit hacky, but the way it works is we can target members of a group. So if a company has their own group of, let's say, their customers, you could be a little bit sneaky and show ads to the members of that group who are probably going to be customers for kind of a conquesting thing. But unfortunately, we can't target the followers of a company page that we don't own. So that's kind of unfortunate. I wish we could. On Twitter, that's really fun to do, targeting all the followers of a company, and you can tell they're probably customers or potential customers, and you can snipe them away. If you want just connections, there's two types of, which means they just click the follow button on you. You're not mutually connected. And then you have connections, which are where someone has said, I want to connect, and you accept that. It's kind of a two-way thing. Connections, you can go into your LinkedIn profile and say, I want to download a list of all of my connections to a CSV file. And they won't give you email address anymore. They cut that out in, I think, 2018. But they will give you first name, last name, company name, job title, and a few other things. And all of those fields you can upload right back into LinkedIn ads and say, hey, go and find these people for me. And it'll match at 90% or higher. It's probably closer to 100% because it came directly from LinkedIn, and you'll get access to that audience. Now that's connections only. If you're working with an influencer, someone who probably has a lot of followers, the best way to do that, there is a program out there called phantombuster.com, and you can tell it specifically, go and scrape a list of all of my followers. And I've done this. And you can take that list and then upload that to LinkedIn ads as a custom audience, as a contact list. Again, first name, last name, company, and job title without an email. And then you can, that'll allow you to target yours or someone else's followers, as long as you have access to their profile. So long-winded answer, a little bit hacky, but yes, you can do that. You just have to go the long way around.
Sounds like there are lots of hacks in this.
Yeah. Yeah, when LinkedIn doesn't give us all of the features and functionality of some of the other ad formats, we have to get a little bit creative.
Yeah, and if you can't be the expert, it's great to work with the expert who has all the hacks.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And the last question, unless someone gets one in real quick, is how would you rate LinkedIn ads to Facebook ads in terms of cost and conversion?
Yeah, excellent question. So Facebook, the targeting for B2B is really, really weak. So we know all of these professionals are probably on Facebook, but it's hard to reach them. So I think of Facebook as kind of a shotgun approach. Each shotgun shell doesn't cost very much. So it's lower cost, but you're kind of doing this spray and pray strategy where 2 or 3 of those BBs will hit your target, but the rest will kind of fall around. So Facebook is probably 3 to 5 times less per click, which is great, super low cost, but your lead quality is really going to suffer because you're not really hitting your target market really reliably, especially if you have higher lifetime values, higher end products. LinkedIn, your targeting is amazing. You can make sure that I think of it like a sniper rifle. You only get one shot, but it's going to be really, really precise. But it is expensive. It's an expensive shot, and you have to reload in between, making it kind of hard for the advertiser. So if your goal is to hit a lot of people inexpensively, and you're willing to kind of sift through the leads, because there'll be mom and pops and tire kickers in there, then Facebook's great. If you have a really valuable kind of prospect that you want to reach them and only them and have really high lead quality, then LinkedIn's really good. I think episode 8 or 9 of my podcast is all about Facebook versus LinkedIn. So check that one out if you want to go deeper. And the next episode is all about Google versus LinkedIn, pros and cons there. So check that one out if you want to go deeper too.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that brings us to the end of our questions, the end of our program. AJ, thanks ever so much. Great program as always. Really appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Have me back anytime.
Wonderful. And thanks everybody for attending. We'll see you next week with 10 simple things you can do right now to bring customers back digitally during the pandemic. And make sure you take advantage of AJ's offers, the checklist, the course on LinkedIn Learning, and his podcast. Thanks very much. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, AJ.
Bye, everyone.